The rain had been falling for hours, turning Oak Creek into a slick mirror of itself. Streetlights glared through the mist like the eyes of unseen watchers, and every puddle reflected the fractured glow. Inside Mercy General Hospital, the emergency room hummed with the low, steady buzz of fluorescent lights. The kind of hum that settles deep in your skull when you're too tired to notice it anymore. Sarah Jenkins leaned against the nurse's station, rubbing the small of her back. Her gray hair was pulled into a loose bun, and her glasses perched slightly crooked on her nose. The orthopedic shoes she had worn for decades squeaked softly against the polished floor as she shifted her weight. At 56, Sarah was the heartbeat of the hospital in ways that no one truly appreciated. She remembered every patient's quirks, every doctor's moods, every room's hidden supplies. But today, like every day, she was invisible. "You look like you're about to collapse," said Jessica, a bright-eyed, energetic 24-year-old nurse in a swirl of pink scrubs. She was typing furiously on a tablet. "Go home. Shift change was 15 minutes ago." "I'm waiting for the rain to let up," Sarah replied, her voice soft, almost weary. "Mrs. Higgins in 304 only trusts me for her vitals." Jessica laughed, shaking her head. "You spoil them, you know. Way too soft, Sarah. That's your problem." Sarah smiled politely, but it didn't reach her eyes. If only they knew, she thought. If only they knew what she had done, what she could do. The was a gentle chaos. A broken wrist from a slip, a fevered child, a drunk college kid sleeping it off, manageable, routine. Dr. Evans, the night attending, sat behind the desk, scrolling through his phone, looking far more important than anyone in the room. "Jenkins," he barked without looking up. "Coffee's empty. Brew a fresh pot before you waddle out to your car." Jessica bristled, opening her mouth to defend Sarah. Sarah simply nodded. "Of course, doctor," she said, turning toward the break room. Years of discipline had taught her how to let humiliation slide off like water from a duck's back. She had stared down death in deserts and jungles far from this quiet Oregon town. A harsh word from a young doctor was nothing. But then the air in the shifted. It wasn't a sound at first, it was a presence, a pressure. The automatic sliding doors at the main entrance whooshed open. Wind, rain, and the smell of ozone poured in, and 6 men stepped inside. They didn't walk. They moved like predators, measured, silent, impossibly confident. Civilian clothes, tactical gear subtly woven in, soaked from the rain but utterly unbothered by it. Eyes scanning, muscles coiled, every step precise. The security guard, Earl, froze mid-crossword. His hand hovered over his taser. Visiting hours are over. You fellas need to." A raised hand stopped him. That single motion held authority so absolute that Earl sank back into his chair. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to spike, every doctor and nurse suddenly aware of a primal tension in the air. Dr. Evans finally looked up, his arrogance melting into panic. "What is this? Who are you people?" The leader ignored him entirely. He moved straight toward the nurse's station, a giant of a man, 6'4" at least, broad-shouldered, a jagged scar trailing from his temple down to his jaw. His eyes, steel gray and unblinking, locked onto Sarah. Jessica gasped, backing toward the cabinet. "Sarah. Call the police." But Sarah didn't move. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, not with fear, but recognition. She knew that walk, that presence. The man stopped 2 feet away from her. He didn't brandish a weapon, didn't threaten. He merely assessed her, like a wolf confirming the hunt. Evans tried again. "Step away from her. I'm calling 911. One of the men by the door's voice was low and grating. "Sit down, Doc, or we'll do it for you." The leader leaned closer, and the tension in the room was a physical thing. Then, with a subtle nod, he acknowledged her. Not with a bow, not with familiarity, just a quiet, loaded respect. "We've been looking for you for 3 days, he said, voice rough from shouting over rotor blades, or maybe just years of discipline. Sarah's eyes widened behind her glasses. "How bad?" she asked. "Catastrophic," he replied. "We couldn't go to a military black site. They're compromised. We needed the best. We needed you." Evans sputtered. She's just a nurse." The leader turned slowly, then snapped a salute. "Ma'am," he said. The room went silent. That one word, "ma'am," dropped a hammer on the fragile sense of reality in the Sarah Jenkins. The sweet, unnoticed nurse was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from anticipation. She adjusted her glasses, rubbed the bun in her hair. The transformation she had buried for decades simmered just beneath the surface, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel it. "Get him inside," she said softly, almost to herself. The 6 men moved as if rehearsed, carrying a gurney, tactical equipment, and the weight of a mission none of the staff could begin to comprehend. Outside, the rain beat against the hospital like a relentless drum. Inside, the held its breath. No one moved. Not a nurse, not a doctor, not even the security guard. All of them waiting, unknowingly, for the quietest person in the room to rewrite every expectation they had about who she was, and what she was capable of. And then, as the doors closed behind the SEALs and their wounded passenger, Sarah Jenkins stepped forward, small, seemingly fragile, but with a gaze that promised something far more terrifying than fear. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm about to erupt inside Mercy General. The first shot would be fired in less than an hour. And no one in that room had the slightest idea who they were dealing with. The storm outside hadn't let up. Rain hammered the roof of Mercy General like the world itself was trying to wash away the sins of the night. Inside, the tension was thicker than the fog outside, and every fluorescent hum felt like a countdown. Sarah Jenkins had barely caught her breath after the initial chaos, but the storm wasn't over, far from it. Marcus had moved the wounded SEAL, Jav, into a makeshift trauma bay in the East Wing. The space was cramped, designed for maintenance rather than medicine, and the power flickered as emergency generators groaned under the load. Sarah knelt beside Jav, pressing a sterile dressing against his chest wound. Her hands were steady, almost disturbingly calm, despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "We've got more coming," Marcus said, peering down the corridor. 4 tangos at least. Full armor, fast. They're moving like hunters. Jessica swallowed hard, gripping the crash bag so tightly her knuckles were white. They just came in like we were nothing," she whispered. "Who are they?" "They're Navy SEALs," Sarah said softly, without looking up. "Not the ones who had just arrived, others. They always sent recon ahead, and they're not here to negotiate." Dr. Evans hovered behind her, his face pale. "Sarah. You can't do this, we're alive," Sarah interrupted, her voice calm but sharp, the kind of tone that cuts through panic like a scalpel through tissue. "And we're keeping it that way." She glanced up briefly. "Listen and follow instructions. I'll handle the rest." The first signs of escalation came in the form of a distant crash, a shelving unit thrown into a hallway, glass shattering, and the unmistakable echo of boots on linoleum. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She didn't flinch. Instead, she adjusted Jav's oxygen line, checked his IV, and surveyed the room like a general scanning a battlefield. "They'll test the perimeter first," she murmured. Marcus looked at her. "How do you know?" "I've seen it before," she said, almost to herself. "Patterns don't lie. They probe, they distract, then they strike where it hurts." Minutes passed, though they stretched like hours. Every shadow looked like a figure. Every sudden noise set Jessica's heart racing. The hospital, once familiar, had become a maze of threat and vulnerability. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights sounded like it carried a warning. Then it came, the first direct attack. 2 figures appeared at the end of the corridor. They moved fast, too fast for anyone else to react. Marcus shouted, and Sarah dropped to the floor, dragging herself behind a low counter. "Go," she barked at Jessica, who scrambled behind her. "Bag Jav. Keep him breathing. Don't look up. Don't hesitate." The intruders fired a few rounds. The bullets hit the counter, pinging and sparking. Sarah's movements were fluid, almost instinctive. She rolled to her feet, aimed, and fired twice, precise, surgical shots that dropped one enemy instantly. The second ducked, but her suppression fire pinned him long enough for Marcus to close the distance. The danger escalated faster than anyone could keep up with. Sarah's mind raced, but her body moved on autopilot. She noticed small things, the angle of a door, a loose fire extinguisher, a crack in the ceiling that could serve as cover. She was no longer just the nurse from Mercy General, she was a strategist, a warrior, a surgeon of war. Meanwhile, the rest of the staff tried to maintain order. "Doctor." Evans fumbled with monitors, trying to stabilize Jav's vitals. Jessica whispered encouragements, but her voice trembled. Fear had a way of infecting the untrained, and tonight, everyone was untrained for what they faced. Through the chaos, Sarah dropped subtle hints of her past, not directly, but in the way she moved, the decisions she made, the calmness under fire. She wasn't shouting orders to assert authority, she was calculating angles, anticipating enemy movement, and preemptively countering attacks. Marcus noticed. He hadn't seen this level of coordination from anyone outside the SEAL teams. "Sarah, how are you doing this?" he muttered as they cleared the hallway. "You've never?" She cut him off. "Don't ask. Focus on the patient. Focus on the building. Focus on survival." A scream echoed from the waiting room. One of the masked intruders had found a civilian. Sarah didn't hesitate. She sprinted ahead, dodging debris, flipping the attacker over her shoulder, and knocking him unconscious with a precise strike. Her movements were efficient, almost rehearsed, but there was no showmanship. This wasn't heroics. This was survival, calculation, and control. Marcus and the SEALs flanked her. They moved as a unit now, synchronized in a way that only comes from years of training together. But even they recognized that Sarah was leading them, guiding them, and making split-second tactical decisions that saved lives, both of the patient and the civilians scattered throughout the hospital. Then came the moment that would almost force her hand, the alarmed hiss of a chemical suppressant system being activated on another floor. Someone had triggered it, either intentionally or by accident. The red emergency lights flashed, bathing the hallways in a surreal, bloody glow. "Sarah," Marcus barked, "we have to move Harvey." She looked back at Jav, then at the chaos spreading through the hospital. Every second counted, and there was no room for hesitation. Her fingers brushed the edge of her surgical kit, the small flare from the supply closet, and even the suppressed pistol she had grabbed in the hallway. Tools of survival, yes, but also reminders of the life she had left behind. The floor beneath them seemed to vibrate with tension, a living entity of panic and danger. Every heartbeat was measured, every breath accounted for. Sarah's lips were pressed in a thin line. She could feel the storm outside, the mercenaries inside, the weight of the building itself threatening to collapse under the pressure of human and mechanical chaos. And then it happened, a sudden explosion from the parking lot outside. Glass shattered, alarms blared, and the building shook violently. Debris rained down, forcing the SEALs and staff to take cover. Jessica screamed, and Dr. Evans fell to his knees, covering his head. Sarah barely flinched. She crawled forward, eyes scanning, calculating. "We keep moving," she said, voice cold and commanding. "We secure the patient. And we survive. No one dies tonight if I can help it." Her calmness in the middle of total chaos sent a shockwave through everyone around her. The hint of her past, the edge of her secret, was there for those perceptive enough to notice. Marcus caught her eye. For the first time, he saw it clearly. This woman, the quiet nurse who baked cookies and delivered baby blankets, was far more than she let anyone believe. But the danger was far from over. More intruders, more threats, and the hospital itself seemed to conspire against them. Each step, each decision, was a balance between life and death. And for Sarah Jenkins, the next choice might be the one that finally revealed everything, the hidden truth she had buried under 15 years of quiet. The storm raged outside. Inside, the storm was just beginning. The part ends here on a tense cliffhanger. The hospital is under attack, more mercenaries are coming, the chemical suppressant system is active, and Sarah's calm mastery hints at a secret past that has yet to fully emerge. The hospital had become a war zone. Smoke curled through the hallways, the smell of wet concrete mixed with antiseptic and gunpowder, and somewhere in the distance, an intermittent alarm wailing like a wounded animal. Outside, the storm lashed against the building, rain streaking windows and lightning illuminating the chaos in brief, violent flashes. Sarah Jenkins moved like a shadow, fluid and silent, guiding Marcus and the remaining SEALs through the maze of overturned gurneys, scattered medical supplies, and debris-strewn floors. Every movement was precise, deliberate, like a chess master anticipating several moves ahead. Jav's breathing was shallow, but stable, thanks to her careful adjustments. "They're regrouping," Marcus whispered, peering around a corner. "Another squad is coming from the west wing." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She didn't need to see them. She could almost predict their route, their strategy. It was instinct. Years of training buried beneath a calm, unassuming life as a nurse had resurfaced with brutal clarity. "Follow my lead," she said, voice calm but commanding. "We'll set a trap." The next moments unfolded like clockwork. Sarah instructed Marcus to barricade the hallway behind them with overturned carts and a metal gurney, while she positioned herself at the junction, weapon ready. Her mind was a machine, calculating trajectories, entry points, and cover positions. The enemy rounded the corner, confident and armed. They didn't see the subtle glint of steel in the shadows until it was too late. Sarah moved with a speed that seemed impossible for someone who had been just a nurse. One intruder went down with a precise strike to the temple. Another collapsed from a well-aimed suppression shot. Chaos erupted as the remaining attackers tried to retreat, only to find themselves trapped by the barriers Sarah had orchestrated. Marcus finally caught up, breathing hard. "Who are you, really?" he demanded, awe and fear in his voice. "I've never seen anyone move like that." Sarah didn't answer. She had no time for explanations, not yet. Jav coughed weakly, and she knelt beside him, checking the wound once again. "Keep him stable," she said. "We're not done." The chemical suppressant system hissed again, releasing a thick mist into the corridors. Seals coughed, struggling for breath, but Sarah adapted instantly. She grabbed a portable respirator from the supply room and secured it over her face, then handed the spare to Marcus. Every step she took was measured, deliberate, even as the hospital descended further into chaos. Then came the unmistakable sound of a helicopter outside. Its rotor blades thudded against the roof, shaking the building with every pass. Through the fogged windows, Sarah could make out the silhouette of a familiar figure stepping onto the landing zone. A man in full tactical gear, a Navy insignia on his chest. It was General Harvey. Time seemed to slow. Marcus froze. The SEALs paused. Even the intruders hesitated, unsure of what the arrival meant. And Sarah's eyes hardened. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The general entered the building, moving with a purposeful stride, scanning the chaos. He stopped abruptly when his eyes met hers. Recognition flashed instantly. Something in the set of her shoulders, the calm precision in her movements, the lethal grace of someone trained beyond measure. "Sarah Jenkins," he said, voice low, incredulous. "I never thought I'd see you here, not like this." She met his gaze evenly, showing no fear. "General, I told you I'd handle it." His jaw tightened. "You've grown. Stronger. Smarter. And yet, the world doesn't know what you're capable of." No one else in the room understood the weight of those words. The SEALs looked at Sarah differently now, awe mingled with disbelief. Even Marcus, who had trusted her leadership implicitly, felt a chill run down his spine. "Now," Sarah said, shifting her focus back to the immediate danger, "we finish this." The final wave of intruders came through the West Wing, unaware of the trap set by someone who had been underestimated her entire life. Sarah moved like lightning, every strike precise, every movement calculated. She disarmed, incapacitated, and neutralized with a surgical precision that was terrifying to witness. The SEALs followed her lead, but it was clear, she was the one in control. The general watched silently, a mix of pride and disbelief on his face. This wasn't just a nurse. This was a warrior, a strategist, and a hero whose secret had been hidden behind years of quiet service. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last intruder fell. Silence descended, heavy and tense. Rain pelted the windows, and the helicopter's rotor blades slowed to a gentle thrum. The chemical suppressant system had been neutralized, the immediate threat contained. Sarah stood in the center of the hallway, chest heaving, eyes scanning for any remaining danger. Marcus approached cautiously. I don't even know what to say," he admitted. "That was incredible." Sarah shook her head, exhaustion tugging at her features. "No one else should have to see that," she said quietly. All of this, it's not about glory. It's about survival, and tonight, we survived." General Harvey finally stepped forward. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of respect and understanding. "The mission isn't over," he said. "But with you here, I know we have a chance. The world may never know your name, Sarah Jenkins, but your actions, your courage, will save countless lives." For the first time that night, Sarah allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The storm outside had not yet passed, but inside, a new calm had settled, a fragile truce in the eye of chaos. And as the first light of dawn began to pierce through the storm clouds, the hospital's battered walls held firm, sheltering the living proof that even in the darkest nights, heroes could rise from the most unexpected places. This part reveals Sarah's hidden identity fully, shows her extraordinary skill set in action, and sets up the final chapter for closure, reflection, and the aftermath of the night's events. The storm had passed, but the hospital still smelled of smoke, antiseptic, and adrenaline. The echo of gunfire had faded, replaced by hushed whispers and the quiet shuffle of exhausted medical staff. Broken equipment and overturned gurneys littered the hallways, a war zone frozen in time. Yet in the midst of the chaos, there was a sense of calm. The battle had been won. Lives had been saved. And the world had glimpsed the impossible. Sarah Jenkins walked slowly through the corridors, checking on the wounded one last time. Her blue scrubs were torn and stained, her face streaked with sweat and grime, but her posture remained straight, unyielding. She moved with the quiet authority of someone who had seen death up close and survived, not by chance, but by choice. Marcus caught up with her, still shaken but trying to steady his nerves. Sarah, he stopped, struggling to find words. I don't even know how to describe what I just saw. You're not just a nurse. She gave him a tired but small smile. I've never been just a nurse, she said softly. I learned long ago that people see what they want to see. I let them underestimate me, and tonight, it worked in our favor. The SEALs gathered nearby, exchanging looks of awe and disbelief. They had fought alongside many elite operatives before, but none had moved with the precision, calm, and deadly efficiency that Sarah had displayed. Every one of them knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Then came General Harvey, stepping through the hallway with measured steps. The man who had once led armies and made impossible decisions now walked with reverence, eyes fixed on Sarah. You did more than survive tonight, he said quietly. You led, you protected. You saved lives that no one else could have saved. Sarah shook her head. I didn't do it for recognition, she said. I did it because it had to be done. That's all. Harvey's gaze softened, though his eyes still burned with intensity. Recognition isn't always about fame, he said. Sometimes, it's about being remembered by those whose lives you touch. Tonight, every life in this hospital, every SEAL who made it through, remembers you, and that is enough. Outside, the first rays of dawn pierced through the storm clouds, casting a pale, golden light across the wet streets. Helicopters lifted off in the distance, retreating after the chaos had ended. The city began to stir, oblivious to the night's deadly events, but the hospital remained a beacon of survival and resilience. Sarah finally allowed herself to lean against a wall, the adrenaline fading and fatigue taking its place. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself breathe, just for a second, before reality came rushing back. Marcus approached and handed her a cup of water. Here, he said. You need it. She accepted it silently, letting the cool liquid soothe her parched throat. Thank you, she murmured. For the first time that night, her voice sounded human, soft, weary, but alive. Harvey approached again, now joined by other senior officers. We'll need to debrief you, Sarah, he said. The world won't know the whole story, but they will hear of the heroism. You've earned more than just our respect. She shook her head, a faint, resolute smile on her lips. I'm not looking for headlines. I only want to make sure everyone gets home safely. That's my mission. That's always been my mission. A young nurse appeared, clutching a blanket. You saved us all, she said, voice trembling. I don't know what we would have done without you. Sarah knelt for a moment, brushing the young nurse's shoulder. You all have strength, she said gently. I just reminded you of it. Outside, the media began to arrive, drawn by reports of the hospital siege. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the city slowly realized that something extraordinary had occurred. But Sarah stayed inside, unseen, letting the others handle the attention. She had never sought the spotlight, and tonight was no exception. Marcus leaned closer. People are going to talk about this, he whispered. They're going to call you a legend. Sarah shook her head, a quiet chuckle escaping her lips. Legends. They often come with a story, she said. mine, isn't finished yet. And it wasn't. Sarah Jenkins had survived the impossible, revealed her true strength, and protected lives when no one else could. But her journey was far from over. She had returned to a world that still underestimated her, yet she now walked through it with the knowledge of her own power. A hidden hero among the ordinary, a warrior in scrubs, a protector whose courage would ripple far beyond the walls of a single hospital. The sun rose higher, painting the city in warm light. Inside, Sarah helped the last of the wounded, offered a steady hand to those in shock, and whispered words of reassurance to the frightened. She had changed the course of a night, a hospital, and a lives, but she remained unchanged herself, humble, steadfast, unstoppable. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the world, the story of Sarah Jenkins, the nurse who was more than anyone imagined, would inspire those who needed hope the most. Because heroes often arrive in disguise, and the strongest ones never ask for recognition.